welcome back to the Seven Figure Flipping Podcast. I've got a special guest today, a fellow military guy, my friend Zach Lemaster from Rent to Retirement. Super fitting. We just spent the last, 3 to 6 months talking to our community very specifically about building wealth through real estate, particularly through buying rentals and real estate assets. And we went over this whole 5F framework. And in one of these F's of the framework, it's finish, it's buying the rental, it's refinancing a flip into a rental. And I talked to Zach maybe a month ago, and he just got me really excited about the turnkey option for the busy professional. And that's what they do at Rent to Retirement. Zach, I'm so pumped to have you, man. Welcome to the show.
Adam, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, awesome. So give everybody maybe the 2-minute overview. Like, who are you? How did you get into real estate? How did Rent to Retirement come to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a background, nothing to do with real estate, as many of us do that find ourselves working in real estate or possibly working in real estate full time, which is a goal for some people. But I have a background in healthcare. My wife and I are both optometrists by education. So I went to many years of school to get that degree. I was commissioned as a captain in the Air Force because I was on scholarship in school. So immediately after school, I went in as a captain in the Air Force and practiced optometry for 7 years or so. And then I exited the military and moved out to Colorado, which is where I'm at today, and continued to work private practice. But I invested in real estate that whole time. My first house that I bought was a duplex. My first year as an Air Force captain, I used a VA loan, so put no money down, bought a duplex, lived in half, rented out the other half, just kind of fell in love with real estate. The concept of, basically using other people's money, i.e. the bank, to acquire an asset that someone else paid off for me, the tenant, right? And I love the concept. And and that was probably about 15 years ago at this point, Adam. But since then, I always tell people, since that first duplex, there's not been a single year that I haven't bought real estate. And I do a lot of different things in real estate, but we're really talking about like buy and hold real estate because that's truly where you build and compound wealth over time. I'm not saying I've made money on all deals, but I've invested in real estate since then. I just love the concept of investing in real estate. It's the only type of investing that I do. But there was this pivotal moment where it really changed the trajectory of our lives and our business. And that's where my wife and I started to look out of state to invest. I was stationed in North Dakota at the time. When I first joined the Air Force, so not like the ideal market to invest in. It had good cash flow, not so much appreciation, but we started to strategically look at different markets throughout the country where we saw better investment returns, better cash flow, better appreciation, lower price points, just better growth trajectory. And so when we started to strategically invest out of state, that really catapulted our investing career and allowed us to, over time, consistently and strategically investing in different markets that did offer the best returns. And doing things like maximizing tax benefits and reinvesting our equity through 1031 exchanges and just scaling up mainly in residential real estate, we were able to replace our active income as docs. That didn't happen overnight, but it did happen over a few short years of dedicated, intentional investing in the right markets. And that was really the birthplace of Rent to Retirement, which is the nation's leading turnkey and build to rent investment company today, which we've built, is the simple fact that we kind of paved a path for success of, identifying the best markets to invest in, and with all the teams and systems set up in those places. So, people can join us and invest in these areas without having to manage from a distance. So we had a lot of friends and family and colleagues that were like, hey, we see the success that you're having in real estate. Can you help us, or can you show us where to invest, or can we just invest with you? And so that was the birthplace of Rent to Retirement. Now, fast forward to where we're at today. I mean, we're running a full scale business operating in probably 18 different markets. We do anywhere from, 800 to 1,000 doors a year, helping investors invest in the best locations across the country where we basically handle everything for them. So that's about as quick of a story as I can give you on me, Adam.
Yeah, it's incredible. There's a lot to unpack there. I just want to start with like fundamentals. And there are so many lenses to view this investment vehicle through that make real estate a particularly attractive vehicle for anybody, the ultra wealthy, the normal person coming up in a blue collar W-2. But the lenses are pretty simple. They can provide you cash flow, B, they appreciate over time as proven by the history of the real estate market. C, you get to claim depreciation on your taxes, which I think is undervalued by a lot of people. They don't realize how awesome that is. And then lastly, which is really cool, is you get debt pay down, meaning a tenant comes in there and rents it, and they're basically paying the mortgage, which makes leverage really powerful when we look at a real estate investment. And you guys perfected that for your own portfolio, and then now you're able to help other people do it. Because the challenge is, why would other people, there are challenges with investing on your own or investing out of state. So what are some of those challenges, and how do you guys help people overcome them by providing a turnkey product?
Yeah, I think sometimes people overthink it. I mean, investing out of state can be daunting because there's a lot of different markets to invest in. And you're like, where do I start? How do I build a team in that area? How do I know that this is a, positive, productive market to invest in long term? And so I think a lot of people just get the analysis paralysis of like, where do I start and how do I efficiently do this where I'm not having to take on a huge risk or buy myself another job, and leveraging teams like ourselves that have already done that and established those teams and do the market research help you to expedite the ability to invest in these different areas. I think first and foremost, being open-minded to investing outside of your local market is a very beneficial thing. It's okay. I started locally. A lot of people want to start locally in their own backyard, but your own backyard may not be the best place to invest. We do know that as people scale, the most successful investors have a diversified portfolio across multiple different markets and asset classes, right? And that helps you scale over time. But how we help people do that is essentially and we basically built this company out of our own investing, right? So, I mean, we identify the markets that have landlord friendly legislation, low taxes, future population, economic growth. We look at areas that have diversity of industries that aren't just reliant on, say, oil or gas that could change the economics in an area if like one major employer moves or something like that. We try to be below the median house price point, which is roughly $400,000 today. So our average new construction investment property is $200,000 to $300,000. That still will achieve an 8 to 12% cash on cash return, but it's in a growth market. So these are all things that we want to focus on to fundamentally set people up for success. And there's different markets that are more cash flow based or more appreciation based. And there's areas where you can get a combination of both. And so it's just matching the investor with the right market and helping them build a strategy and a plan. And I think that's really the key to it, Adam, is not just, having a marketplace of different investment options. It's actually understanding the tax benefits, right? And understanding what is the investor's goal and how do we help them achieve that and expedite their goal by being a strategic investor, investing in some of the best locations. And we have, the local managerial team set up to handle management. That's full scope management. So they're not having to manage from a distance. We have, the property insurance providers. We have real estate specific CPAs and attorneys that will handle everything from setting up LLCs. So we really take a full scope view at setting up a turnkey investment property. Turnkey is a buzzword. A lot of people, use turnkey interchangeably, and it's kind of ill-defined. Often, sometimes people think about a turnkey property as a, 1920s house that's been renovated in the Midwest in a C or D class asset. And there are people that sell those assets, but that's not us. We focus on brand new construction properties where you have low maintenance, predictable income. You have higher upside for both rents and home prices increasing year after year because they're in growth markets. You have builder warranties on the houses. So that's the type of asset that we focus on, is A-class new construction properties. And we also have, lenders as a part of this where we can offer unique creative financing options for people where they can buy multiple investment properties with as little as 5% down on true investment properties. Most people think you have to buy a residential property 20-25% down, and that's just not the case. There's lenders that offer more creative options. They have ways for people to buy with low money down. We have incentives, and we can go through some of this as well, but we try to piece all these things together to package an investment property in a market that we've identified to be a successful investment market with growth potential, where we handle everything for them and also help them build out a strategy to accomplish their goal and expedite their goals.
Yeah, I think the strategy piece is important because everybody has a different situation. I want to dig into the turnkey piece of this. I don't know if maybe you and I talked about this, but my first properties I purchased were turnkey C class 1930s rehab properties. Rehabbed really well. That means somebody bought this house, fixed it up really well, placed a tenant, placed property management for me, and then I purchased it and it was already kind of in motion. And in your case, you mentioned you guys are doing complete new construction, which is when you told me that I was like, wait a minute, there's cash flow in that. That's awesome. And I think where I see this all the time, by the way, from rental buyers. They'll get into their first one or two deals. Maybe they're not fully rehabbed. Oftentimes they're not fully rehabbed. So then they get hit with maintenance and repairs, capital expenditures. And at the end of the year, they find out they weren't really cash flow positive and it's actually just a money pit. And they're like, this crap sucks. I'm out of here. I'm not doing this. Like this real estate thing, they lied to me. It doesn't work. So, how are you able to do new builds and create positive cash flow? Can you just kind of talk about the model a little bit?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you talked about your own experience with that because that's so common, right? Is that and then whether you're buying, quote unquote turnkey, or whether you're just buying your first rental property and then finding out that yeah, it's a lot of work and there's a lot of expenses with that. I mean, people build wealth through buy and hold real estate in good markets with good teams in a market that has an undersupply of housing and has demand. Like at the end of the day, that is the path to wealth. There's a lot of different things you can do in real estate. You can flip properties, you can wholesale, you can invest in REITs, whatever the case is. But there's a lot of really cool ways to participate in real estate. But at the end of the day, to build like true financial independence and build generational wealth, like it's about holding on to those assets, right? And letting time do what it does, ideally in a growth market. And so I think that's just really, really important to think about because I started flipping houses and wholesaling and making good money. And I put that money into buy and holds, right? So like you get that infinite return when you're doing the value add, but then you got to think about there's a lot of business owners out there. And I know I'm getting a little off topic. I'll answer your question in a second. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, but there's a lot of like active business owners and flippers that are not good investors, actually. And so
Yes.
you got to think about the side, and this goes to one of your F's, right? Is to finish, right? Finish the goal, which is to ultimately own quality assets in good markets that cash flow well, appreciate all these things, and maximize your tax benefits with accelerated depreciation. All these things are really important. And that's where like that compounding growth happens. But really, what we found out over time, because we still flip houses and we still have some of those, Midwestern $150,000 houses. While we do have some of those, we've really put a big emphasis on new construction, build to rent properties because we've just found better performance over time, maximizing, the appreciation and things like that. But our company does two things, and hopefully this will make a lot of sense to answer your question directly. Is that one, we build houses, right? That's our core, but we only build about 10% of the houses that we have on our marketplace. The other thing that we do is we form partnerships with national and regional builders that have quality builds across the country in a lot of different markets where we actually are able to negotiate wholesale type of pricing with them because our community as a whole, we're doing volume, right? So we're actually the first company to be able to offer wholesale type of discounts on A-class new construction properties that historically only institutional buyers like Blackstone would be able to access because they're coming in and buying, hundreds of thousands of houses. Well, we're doing the same thing, but we're able to pass those benefits onto the individual investor. And so there's some benefits of economies of scale here. But we first look for the market dynamics, right? I mean, new construction all across the country does not make sense. We want to be in areas, like I said, below that median house price point where we still have strong rental numbers, low taxes on the houses, and landlord-friendly legislation. But to be specific, like an example property, call it 200 or 300,000, a $300,000 house in the Southeast in a growth market is likely renting at that $2,400 to $2,600 a month, where you're still positive cash flow at $400 to $500 a month, putting 20% down. And so that those markets still exist. And some people think, to your point, that those don't exist, but it's all about finding the right market. But where it really gets exciting is that we were able to offer below market pricing to investors that they would not be able to access on their own. And that's a common misconception when you think about turnkey is, oh, I'm buying a property at or above market value because they've already done the value add. Well, with build to rent, it's completely different. So we can go and build partnerships with DR Horton, Toll Brothers, LGI, Lennar, all these national builders that have inventory all across the country. We get to cherry pick their new construction inventory in the best markets, access them before they go to the MLS to a retail buyer. They're built to retail standards, so these are quality houses, and we're able to offer anywhere from like a 6 to 12% discount on those properties to the average investor. So that allows you to be extremely strategic, because you can buy a property below market value. But I think to take this one step further, Adam, where this gets really exciting for the investor, regardless if you're a new investor, if you're an active investor that's flipping a bunch of properties, is that this is a strategic way for you to build and scale your portfolio, because you can use these incentives however you want. For example, on a $300,000 house, let's say you had a 10% incentive being part of our investor community and the relationship that we've built with you guys, where you get off market pre-construction deals. They're still done, but they just haven't been listed on the MLS yet. So on a $300,000 house, you get a 10% incentive that you get to use however you want. So that's $30,000. Now you can take that as an immediate price reduction. So you're buying the house at $270,000, you have $30,000 of immediate equity. That helps your cash flow to be better because your loan is less. You have immediate equity that you could, sell in 1031 quicker, do a cash out refinance quicker. You don't have to build that equity over time. You have it immediately. Or you can use that 10% credit however you want. We will actually give that back to you as cash at closing. So on a $300,000 house, that's still positive cash flow because it's in the right market, you can get $30,000 potentially back at closing. That covers half of your down payment. Or you can use it to buy down rates into the threes, which is well below what the Fed is ever going to lower the rates to on a 30-year fixed loan. And that allows you to maximize cash flow. And I'll say one more thing on this, and I'm sure there's a lot to unpack. We also have lender relationships where we've been able to create specific loan structures for our community, again, because we're doing volume. And so you can buy, and not in all markets, but most, there's local credit unions where you can buy new construction A-class investment properties that are positive cash flow with as little as 5% down. You can buy up to 5 investment properties, assuming you qualify for those. You still have to qualify. But think about this. So if you're buying a new construction property with 5% down and you're getting a 10% cash back at closing, then you can essentially buy property with no money down and possibly even get money back in your pocket. So those are just some of the things that we strategically help investors work through to help them, grow their portfolio. We have a lot of investors that earn a high income, whether it's through real estate or their W-2, whatever the case is, which is great, but they're paying a significant amount in taxes. And so we can help them actually use things like accelerated depreciation, where they get this huge tax benefit that gives them more money that they'd otherwise give to Uncle Sam to actually reinvest in more assets that have additional tax benefits. And if you're using these things like 5% down loans with 10% back at closing, like you could, in theory, buy a large portfolio with no money out of pocket and have this huge tax incentive to just expedite your investing goals. So I know I went deep on that, but those are just some of the things we work with people on.
Yeah, I think here's kind of the big picture is we have a lot of flippers. I mean, we are 7-figure flipping, and these people are flipping properties and they're paying short-term capital gains and they're making a lot of money, $2-3 million a year in some cases. Maybe they're in California or somewhere on an expensive East Coast city. And believe it or not, a lot of them aren't holding properties. We try to tell our people, like, for every 2 you flip, you should be buying one. Like, you should be keeping one. I don't know if you've ever talked to anybody who's been in the industry, the real estate industry, for 2 decades or more. And the number one thing people always tell me when I say, what would you do differently? It's I would buy and hold more assets. I would have kept more assets, because it's just like, it's not different than investing in equities. It's time in market. Time in market's really, really powerful. Not timing the market, obviously. I want to dive in. I think a big mental hurdle for a lot of people is getting into these assets and having to bring these big down payments. You've got this really creative, unique structure for people with the 5% down. Does that affect their cash flow? Is that still a good investment for them? Can you just maybe talk about some examples on that particular strategy?
Yeah, certainly. And I'll preface this with saying, like, you can use whatever loan structure you want, right? Our goal is to offer new construction property in a good market, and then we, can skin the cat however we want to, right? We can use whatever loan structure makes sense for you, and then be conscious of all these things like the tax benefits and how do we structure those to help you scale and build that portfolio. Because yeah, to your point, I mean, like, holding real estate at the end of the day is where wealth is built ultimately. But yeah, so the 5% down option, I mean, and just you don't have to only put 5% down. You could put 7% down, 8% down. It just whatever makes sense for you. They'll go as low as 5% on up to 5 investment properties. If you're buying, an A-class asset with a 95% loan in place, you may not be positive cash flow on that asset. We have some that are. These are more Midwestern properties that just have the higher rent to price ratio. They're more break even or positive cash flow. But again, you could find the right balance for you. You could put 20% down. We have plenty of people that use conventional loans, and they are still positive cash flow, right? And they still get that incentive where they can have immediate equity, or they get the money back to cover part of their closing costs and their down payment. But yeah, on some they may not be. But the people that do that strategy, like myself, like I don't necessarily at this point in my investing, I don't necessarily need extra cash flow. I need tax benefits because we're earning good money, like a lot of your flipping students. And so, that could be a strategy to really maximize your tax benefits. This 5% down loan that I keep referencing, and there are multiple different loan options. This is just one that's unique that I'm talking about. There's no PMI. So there's no mortgage insurance. Normally with a conventional loan, you put less than 20% down, you're paying mortgage insurance. There's no PMI. There's no prepayment penalty with this loan. So a common strategy for someone that's earning good money would be to, especially if they want to be aggressive on the tax side, is to use this creative loan structure, matching it with the incentives we have to just acquire a bunch of real estate. Some of it may not be positive cash flow, maybe some of it's break even, but they get this huge tax benefit. And they also have this immediate equity that they're in. So they could refi in year 2 or 3 or 4, whatever the case is, to then, lower the down payment, or I'm sorry, lower the interest rate, increase the cash flow essentially to have a positively cash flowing investment portfolio. But again, if cash flow is important at this point, then let's look at loan structures where you can be positive cash flow, or maybe you put a little bit more down than 5%. So it's really unique to each investor and what makes sense for them. It's all about how do we help you advance your investing goals? How do we help you hold more real estate? And how do we help you maximize the tax benefits with real estate investing in the markets that are going to have strong growth potential? Our average rental increase year per year is 6%. That's double the national average. And there's still markets today and over the past 2 years with increasing interest rates that still have double-digit appreciation. Year after year. It's all about supply and demand, and being in the markets that have an undersupply of housing, below that median house price point. So these are all things to be conscious of, and leverage you can pull based on your own individual situation.
Yeah, that it's such a strong strategy for the multitude of reasons you talked about. For the markets that you're in, what markets do you guys serve currently, and why did you pick those markets?
We mainly work in 2 geographic areas, and these are a little bit different in the asset classes. So again, we want to be in it. We have our fundamentals, right? We want to have at least an 8 to 10% or 8 to 12% cash on cash return on assets so you have positive cash flow. That's assuming you're putting 20% down with a conventional loan. We want to be in areas that, price point where you have affordability, where we have the legislation, the tax structure that is attractive. So all these things are important, but generally we're Midwest and Southeast. In the Midwest, these are areas like Ohio, Indiana, Missouri. These are probably your $150,000 to $200,000 houses. Some of those are new construction. Some of them are the typical rehab stuff that probably yield a little bit higher cash flow, maybe getting up into the mid teens for your cash on cash, but they'll maybe not have as much appreciation long term. Where we are more focused, which I don't know, 60 to 70% of our new construction is Southeast. These are more growth markets. These are areas like Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Carolinas. These are areas where the house price points might be a little bit higher on new construction, maybe average 300,000, that still are positive cash flow. So take a little bit more money to buy them, but they have higher appreciation potential long term, and the rents are increasing year after year. So those are kind of the 2 geographic areas we focus on for those reasons.
Yeah, I think that's we talk to people all the time about picking a market, and supply and demand is always kind of the number one measure of that market. Is there population growth? Are people coming there, or are they leaving there? And then what is the supply and demand? And we look through a little different lens. Typically, we're looking at first-time home buyers oftentimes as flippers. Like, is there a lot of first-time home buyer activity happening, that medium price point house? What are the days on market? is it a seller's market, buyer's market? And obviously that changes over time. And I think the same thing can be said for rental properties. Now, I know some states are heavier rental properties than others. Do you take that into account? Like some states are very few rental properties. And you told me something in our conversation a while back that I thought was really fascinating. Cause like I own properties in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and it's like almost all rentals. Like it's not a lot of home ownership, particularly in the areas that I own. That's not necessarily the case with your property. So I think that's fascinating. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, lot to unpack there, and I think, I mean, from the flipper lens, you guys are really focusing on like the retail market, which is important to focus on as well. But we want to heavily focus on the long term rental market. But it's important to understand what the retail market looks like, to look at the long term outlook, because it's quite often, I mean, the average hold time for a lot of our investors is 4 to 6 years. And what they'll end up doing, they'll buy a new construction property, they'll let the home build equity through appreciation and debt pay down. They'll cash flow the heck out of it in the meantime. But then they'll likely have enough equity where they will want to sell and 1031 exchange to avoid capital gains to grow their portfolio and turn one property into two or three over the course of 4 to 6 years. And that's where you get that hockey stick growth in your portfolio, is just going through those 1031 exchanges. And of course, you don't have to bring additional capital to the table. You're just reinvesting your equity. But often they'll sell to home owners and retail buyers because they pay the most for the house, right? So we want to be conscious of what the retail market looks like as well. Generally speaking, and it's hard to look at a state as a standalone, maybe from a legislative and tax standpoint, but we really want to look at a microeconomic scale of each one of these sub markets and these MSA areas that we're focusing on, from a rental standpoint. There is a huge population shift down to the southeast, to the Sun Belt. We just know that. So a lot of these markets, I mean, like areas like Texas and Florida, they have over 2% population growth year after year. These are the fastest growing states in the country. Also, though, in the Midwest, where you think that the population is somewhat stagnant from a state view, there's also a lot of population shifting within the state. And so you could have an area that is growing, even though the state as a whole may not, maybe actually appear to be losing population. And that really drives like industry and job growth is important to look at in that regard. But we want to be in areas when we're not doing like community build to rents. We're doing mainly infill and areas where and I think this is what you're alluding to with our conversation, is where they're established communities that are mainly home owners in those areas. We actually have a 50% threshold where we have to have at least 50% homeowners in those areas. Often it's closer to 70 or 80%. But we're building in established communities where these are families that want to live in these houses for a long period of time. Often they're suburbs near the metro area that are still commutable, maybe more affordable. But these are areas that are highly sought after for tenants that want to develop families, and that helps keep the tenants in the property for a long period of time. So those are kind of some of the metrics that we look at to ensure that they're going to be sustainable investment properties, and that you have the highest resale value when it comes time to sell that property. Because most people are not holding, even though some people think, hey, I'm going to hold this property for 30 years, let the loan be paid off. While that is an option, more than likely there's a point where it makes the most sense to sell 1031 and scale up.
Yeah. And I think something we talk about in our community is return on equity. I think initially you focus heavily on like cash on cash return, maybe a little bit of capitalization rate, but really what you find as you start to gain a lot of equity is like, okay, what's my return on equity? And can I do more with that? Could I do more with that equity if I realize those gains and put them somewhere else? And a lot of times, like you said, the answer is yes. Typically after 4 to 6 years, depending on what the market does and then how much debt pay down you get. But I think that's wonderful, man. I love what you guys are doing. I think this is the industry that we live in, which is very active real estate, very much like make a lot of active income. And it does provide that opportunity for us and our people. But if you don't have the second component to your investment strategy of placing that capital and that wealth into a tax advantaged vehicle, like a real estate asset, a multifamily asset, something that is going to not just it's not about just making the money, it's about keeping the money and growing the money without you doing active activities. And I think for most of us, I don't know anybody who got into real estate and said, yes, I want to be on the grind for the next 40 years of my life, working 14 hours a day. I'm not sure that that's what anybody's goal is, but they get really excited about all the active money they're making and they forget the second part of the strategy. So I'm glad you guys are doing this, because a lot of the excuses that I hear, I don't want to call them excuses, but a lot of the um, kind of objections to like buying rentals, like I live in California, I don't really, I don't really trust doing it out of state. I don't, there's all these things that um, are just obstacles, really. There's turnkey options. Rent to retirement has new build turnkey options. It's really hard to mess up a new build house. It's really hard to have a bunch of maintenance and repairs. You're not in the ghettos. You're in good areas. Like, this is ideal for a lot of investors. We need to get more investors doing this.
Yeah, lots of good points on that. And just to further some of that, Adam, I think that, I mean, one thing that I've learned over investing, I mean, we have a very large portfolio. Now it cash flows net 7 figures annually. And we've been able to do that. Again, that didn't happen overnight. I'm not saying that to gloat here. I'm saying that that's achievable, investing in the right locations and consistently doing that over time. But really, what allowed me, because we're active investors as well, we make good money through our active business, and we're able to save the most or all of that potentially and reinvest it through buy and hold real estate and maximizing the tax benefits. But I think that's something that's overlooked a lot of times with people that start earning 7 figures actively, and maybe a lot of your community members, like you said, that are earning $2-3 million a year through flipping. That's great, but that is a grind, right? Even if you have teams and systems in place, you got to always have the next deal coming. And that can be an 80-hour work week. I think people are attracted to real estate because of the lifestyle aspect of it. And you can still cheat, like over time, if you play your cards right and you're a strategic investor, you could achieve that same level of income passively eventually if you just keep your money in real estate and you like maximize tax benefits. So to use a numeric example here, because I think this will be applicable to a lot of your audience, we work with a lot of newer investors, a lot of people that this is the first house they bought, first house out of state. We work with busy professionals that earn a lot of money. We have a lot of multimillionaires that have just their W-2, like C-suite executives, doctors, attorneys, engineers, lawyers, whatever the case is. We work with a lot of active real estate investors, and they really just need that tax haven and that consistent passive income. And so a lot of what we do is helping them learn how to maximize the tax benefits and do things like 1031 exchanges and cost segregation studies. So to use an example, let's say you bought $1 million worth of real estate, and you were able to use leverage. So you put 20% down on $1 million worth of real estate. That's $200,000 down. Most of our cost seg studies that we run, I run cost seg studies on every property I buy. My goal every year is to buy enough real estate to offset all of our income, which I've been able to do successfully every single year.
Me too.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it requires a lot of real estate to buy, right? But that's huge because that's the easiest way to give yourself an immediate bump in your income. If you're earning $1 million a year and you're paying half of it in taxes, like that's painful, right? And I think a lot of people have a wake up call when they start to, or I know I did when we started to earn like active income into that realm. And it's like, holy cow, I need to actually, have a tax strategy. And so that's the easiest way to give yourself an immediate raise. And guess what? Have more capital that you otherwise give to Uncle Sam that you can reinvest and have other tax benefits that snowballs, right? That's how you get this huge growth in your portfolio. But let's say you bought $1 million worth of real estate. Most of our cost seg studies on new construction, which you do get better depreciation benefits on new construction versus older homes. We roughly see between 30 to 35%. I've had some of my cost seg studies come in as high as 44%, depending on the property. But everyone wants to be conservative, so we'll use 30% as a number. So not removing land, just using simple numbers here. $1 million worth of real estate, 30% is $300,000, right? Now this year we're at 60% bonus depreciation. So 60% of 300K I think is $180K if I'm doing my math correctly. So if you bought $1 million worth of real estate, you put $200,000 down as a down payment on and buying a portfolio that's positive cash flow in A-class areas that's appreciating every year and the rents are going up and all these things, right? Which you should be doing anyways. You put $200,000 down to buy $1 million worth of real estate and you get a $180,000 tax deduction. Like you're almost saving as much as you're using as your down payment. And you can expedite this using some of these loan structures we talk about where, hey, let's say you bought that $1 million worth of real estate with 5% down. That's $50,000 to buy $1 million worth of real estate. And then you match that with some of the buying incentives that we have where you get 10%, up to 10% back on your property. So you're actually buying $1 million worth of real estate with zero money down, possibly getting 40 or 50K back in your pocket. But you have $1 million worth of real estate. You get a $180,000 tax deduction this year if you close in 2024. So, I mean, these are just some of the things where it's like, if you can be a strategic investor, and like you said, it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep, and then you reinvest. I mean, that's where you just like create generational wealth, right? That's the ticket right there.
This is next level wealth building stuff. It's so simple, but it's next level. And like, it's the end of 2024. So if you're sitting on a lot of cash earned this year and you're thinking like, holy cow, I don't want to have another year like I did last time where they came and took all this cash from me because I owe taxes. That like right now is your time to go and get into assets that you can bonus depreciate so you can reduce your tax burden. All that means is instead of sitting on cash and giving it to the IRS at the end of this year or probably next October, by the time most of you entrepreneurs do your taxes, that just means I'm taking that money, I'm going to put it somewhere else where it's going to continue to compound and build wealth and then give far less, if not nothing, to the government, which is what my goal is every year. Last year, $0 in taxes owed. This year, I'll have $0 in taxes owed. And all those dollars I'm putting into assets that are doubling every 3, 4, 5 years. And then it comes back to me and I just keep solving that same problem every year and it's building and stacking wealth. So this is towards the end of the year, 2024. You have to do it in 24. We're going to put a link for Zach's team in the description. You definitely got to get in there. You got to start talking to these guys. If you're in a market where you don't feel like you can buy rentals and you're not investing into any other type of real estate that you're buying and holding, like you need to do this. This is really, really critical so that you don't just make money, but you also just keep your money. Like,
Yeah. And
that's what we
Adam,
should be doing.
thank you for that. And I'll add one more thing in there too, because I mean, you guys, we love partnering with you and the cool things that you guys are doing and helping your investors. And so we've also offered a $500 closing cost discount where we'll just pay up to $500 of your closing costs for anyone that comes from your community. But we need to know that they're from your community. So, definitely click on that link. Let us know that you're from the 7-figure flipping community, and that'll just be a little cherry on top of an additional bonus. And we also have properties that we're providing per your request, Adam, that are before the general public sees them, so they get first look at a lot of that inventory as well. But yeah, you have to close on the property in 2024. You don't have to run the accelerated depreciation, the cost seg study. You don't have to do anything with that until you file your taxes. You have to do it at some point before filing your taxes. You can do it next year, but you have to own the property this year. And it's dramatically important because next year it goes down to 40% accelerated depreciation. So even if you don't have tax, you're going to pay this year, it's a carry forward loss and it never goes away. And so I would challenge people that if you're building a business where you don't know if you're going to have, all the tax write-offs you need in 2025, 6, 7, like get it on the books this year and own the property this year, meaning you close on it this year, because that is what's going to allow you to carry that loss, the maximize that loss forward at 60% versus 40% last year. And even if you're not an active flipper where you can claim RE Pro status, we still have ways through short-term rentals, because we do a lot in short-term rentals as well, where you can still take accelerated depreciation because it's considered an active business, even if you're not a real estate professional at the level of, say, someone that's an active flipper. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks so much, Zach. That's incredible. Like, this is the tool. This is the tool that the most wealthy people in the world build their wealth through or preserve their wealth. So I'm super stoked that you took the time out of your day to come here and educate our community, educate our followers, people in our universe. So thanks, man. I appreciate it. And if you guys don't know, there's a link for this particular in this podcast for Rent to Retirement. You got to check it out, especially if you want the $500 towards your closing cost. Tell them you came from 7FF and Zach's team will take care of you. Zach, thanks so much, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you much, Adam. It's been a pleasure.